We're here. Welcome to a land of Mickey Mouse. Anaheim, California. A little rainy outside, so we're going to take the show inside at the Anaheim Hilton. Here to speak on an interesting topic, Travel Trends 2019 from the eyes of an international supplier. Thank you, USTA, for the invitation. Should be a good time.
All right. Thank you all for coming back again and getting this going. Without further ado, FAISAL.
Thanks, Malcolm. Appreciate it. Hello. How are you guys? I asked not to be the guy that butted up against the happy hour or drinks in order to have your full and undivided attention. I know how that normally works. First and foremost, thank you, Malcolm. U.S. travel, obviously, to Bonnet exclusive travel. The U.S. destination is near and dear to our heart because that is 95% of our business. And when it comes to revenue, obviously, I have a lot of allegiances towards what pays my paycheck. Not only that, it's our backyard and where each and every one of us calls home, or at least for the most part, I think, within this group. So when going through travel trends, destinations, forecasting for 2019, I thought I'd take a step all the way back and explain to everybody what Bonnet is quickly. I'll give you the high-level overview. Bonnet is an inbound, or as you would call it, a receptive tour operator. So we distribute rooms throughout North America to tour operators who then sell to travel agents. Some of our largest clients include hotel beds back there. You look at Virgin Holidays, Thomas Cook, British Airways, Emirates Holidays, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We currently work with just under 5,000 properties in the US, and we distribute to 71 different countries worldwide. So for us, we take a little bit more curated approach. So as some of our wholesale competitors or the larger bed banks or aggregators or what anybody in this room may call them, we definitely take a more, as I mentioned, curated towards the product that we have. We still are heavily engaged with not just the properties, the suppliers, but we're also very, very engaged at a very senior level with our top tour operators. Why is that relevant for this room is that we are very much in tap and in tune with the travel trends that are going on, not just for our destination, but where people are spending their money and where there may or may not be a shift in a share of wallet. And so, with myself, we have a wonderful sales team, on the distribution side, but I'm constantly flying the globe, just trying to understand what's next, what's happening, meeting and engaging with senior leaders in order to best try and predict or forecast where and how our business is going to trend moving forward. So, I guess I'll start with the most impactful thing thus far in 2019, which fortunately is temporary come to the end, which I'm sure you guys have spoken about in this room, the government shutdown. So from our side, it's one of those things where you don't know the impact. It becomes difficult to quantify. Data and stats are coming out. I've heard $100 million a day from some very valuable sources here in the room, all the way up to $2 million, dependent on for smaller tour operators, all the way down to $2 million down to smaller tour operators or tour companies that are, say, distributing tours to Alcatraz. From our standpoint, it is definitive that Washington, D.C. took a material hit, especially with arrivals in July. We saw probably double-digit cancellations, just over 10% for the destination itself. And then we saw a halo effect that impacted the national parks throughout the U.S. And so why does that matter? We're dealing with international travelers. Our average booking window is 127 days in advance of travel. So for somebody to cancel, you hope and pray that they're rebooking to another destination. The reality is they probably didn't come or they went somewhere else. I mean, nobody's going to go to Disneyland if they tell you all the rides are closed. So that's something that we saw, and the impact when I mentioned halo, that's the likes of California. We saw significant dips in pockets within California. When you look at San Francisco, Central California, they're obviously not impacted. But when you look at LA tertiary areas where people may fly and drive and come in and out of those destinations, we definitely saw about a 10 to 11% decrease year on year. January as a whole, as far as arrivals, and when we compare this to with our other tour operators, this isn't a Bonnetel specific thing. The only thing I get to do is validate data off of what actually happens. January, due to the 4 weeks prior, where there was a potential government shutdown looming, we did see bookings decrease for arrivals within January and February. February, obviously, the minute it's done, we see a mad rush of a large influx of last-minute bookings. But the destination as a whole, to get to my point, was definitely impacted. How do we quantify it? Time will tell. But it is something that we can't gloss over, ignore, and hopefully there's a long-term solution, because I don't want to see the rest of the year if it continues that way. That being said, when you talk about government shutdowns, politics, and everything else, we all get seduced by the man in the Oval Office, and it's Trump, it's the Trump slump. And really, after the shock and awe of him coming into office, I think people have become a little bit numb to his rhetoric and what he has to say or do from an international standpoint. And irrespective of your political views, the reality is people don't give a shit. So they don't. Like, they want to come to the US, they're going to keep coming to the US. And the main reason they don't give a shit is that we are the United States of America, and we have a ton of cool stuff to come see. And so people, after they get over, looking at their phone every day, it's now become a little bit comical, and it's more of a entertainment piece as opposed to an inhibitor to travel to North America, more specifically the United States. Now, what we do see that materially impacts our business and travel into the US comes down to currency. It's the cost or the strength of the dollar versus the international currency, which then is directly correlated to the cost to come to the United States. So if we look at our largest source market, the UK, the pound has been on a roller coaster. So we see bookings ebb and flow depending on how that pound is doing. And when you look at that paralleled with how the United States has been performing as a whole, especially within the hospitality sector, hotels are running at record high RevPAR ADRs and occupancies. Hotels are holding rates. We're seeing hotels being built everywhere in every major city and even secondary destinations. Times are pretty frothy for hoteliers right now. I do think that's going to come to an end. Personally, can't wait. We can talk more on that later, as there's probably going to be a reality check that resets kind of mindset and people's ways of approaching international markets and other tourism in general. And so when you look at the pound and the impact of that, for me personally, I'm more freaked out about what's going to happen with Brexit and the big question mark than anything else that's going on. And I don't think that people are taking it serious enough, and I don't think there's enough conversation as to what the impact of that is, especially given our dependence on the British traveler coming to the United States. I mean, when you talk to British nationals and you ask them the impact to their lives, they're just now starting to get a sense of what reality looks like if they were to move out of the EU. And the reality is not pretty. I mean, they lose pensions, they lose health care, cost of certain things go up, some of them don't have jobs. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And then the ripple effect out to the EU, you can't imagine that if a French national who lives in London loses his pension that he's had for the last 25 years in the UK, that France is going to sit there and not retaliate in some way, shape, or form to the British national that's working at the bank or wherever in Paris, France, or within France. And so the impact on that, why it's relevant to us, it may not seem relevant to us today because that's going on over there. It's far away. The headlines really just talk about Theresa May and that's it. And we just kind of go, yeah, whatever, we're the US, we can keep going. We have our own problems domestically. But in reality, I think it can have and will have a significant impact. And given the fact that we're almost a month away from what I call D-Day, it's very, very concerning. The next thing that we've seen within our business is that destinations are performing well. Secondary, tertiary destinations are exploding. We're seeing bookings coming from random cities I didn't even know existed within the United States. I think that awareness from Brand USA has helped a lot with that. I think that when you look at why people are traveling to these secondary destinations, America, there's always the gateway cities, the New Yorks, the Orlandos, the LAs, the San Franciscos, et cetera, but people are looking for experiences that are different from what they've done before. So a lot of it has to be they want to do things like Americans do things, and more specifically, especially with our tour operators, they're very laser focused on putting out products that enable the traveler to live like a local. And so they're really, really focused on, I know ABC hotels. Normally I'm very candid, but I don't know who works for who in the room, so I'll pivot and just keep it general. We don't like the boring brand.com. We want the local hotel that people that live here go dine there, hang out there at the bar, those sort of things. And that's really becoming a focus. And now when you look at secondary, tertiary cities, it's no secret when you look at development within these cities, it is exploding. Everybody's trying to move into these markets. Airlift is starting to come out of these markets, which I'll touch on in a second. But the reality is we're seeing and continue to see significant growth within secondary, tertiary cities. Now, what I warned about 18 months ago was that these cities can very quickly become overbuilt. And we're starting to see softness in certain markets, the secondary cities in which there's too much supply coming online. So if you just look from a real estate standpoint, there's no secret New York has experienced a significant correction within their real estate market because of all the supply that's come online, not only within Manhattan and New York City, but all the tertiary and secondary areas that surround what is Manhattan. And the same is going to happen from a hotel standpoint, and the same thing is starting to happen. So all those beautiful cranes and the arrogant hoteliers that think that they're the only game in town, well, guess what? Reality will set in, and we're starting to see it. Now, and for all those suppliers, I love you, don't worry. Each and every one of you, you're near and dear to my heart. No, supply is very important to us for obvious reasons, but there is just economic impacts that sometimes people don't think will ever happen to them. The next thing that, when you look at tourism to the US and what impacts travel and what continues to impact travel in a positive manner is safety. Terrorism, we find, is a direct contributor to people's ability and willingness to travel. The reason being is that if you're scared of going somewhere, we've all heard of the destinations with the unfortunate terrorist attacks when you look at Las Vegas, my hometown, you look at Paris, stuff in Egypt, et cetera, when there's political uncertainty and terrorism that invades a certain market, it does have a material impact. Fortunately for us, the US still maintains and is perceived as a safe destination. And knock on wood, that continues to happen. And we obviously all hope for the best. We're Americans. And as long as that continues to happen, people will always gravitate and have continued to gravitate back to the US, irrespective of even currency sometimes and our political atmosphere. And so terrorism, or lack thereof, continues to play a key part in the success of the United States. And let's face it, I just came back from Egypt 3 weeks ago. It feels good to be an American walking around the US, I can tell you that. We walk around and feel safe, generally, and we always are safe. And that's always and will continue to be a key contributor to it. And now when I go back towards the thing that I mentioned earlier, airlift. And so one of the key contributors to the growth within the US and things that we track, especially supplying some of the world's largest airlines in the world, such as Emirates, Thomas Cook, you look at British Airways, Virgin, is airlift. Airlift still continues to expand in the US, and for us, it's a very simple story. Follow the airlift. If there's a plane flying here, there's some new people to come in that we can all market and sell to. Pretty straightforward. Most of the people don't ever do it. And so one of the things that we've done and seen is that there's new airlift and new service coming into the likes of San Diego, Nashville, Portland, other destinations, which again are bringing foreign travelers into new markets like never before. And that continues to be a strategy of ours and a thing that has been fueling the growth of Bonnetel within these secondary tertiary cities, and will continue to do so going throughout 2019. And hopefully, if the economy remains stable, the same thing will continue into 2020. Another trend that we see is the reliance on technology. So I think that everyone's gone overboard with, technology is going to save the world, or other rhetoric that technology are ruining our lives. And I think we're kind of moving back into a middle ground in which people are understanding how to best leverage technology. So why is that relevant for international travelers coming to the US? Like never before, you can come into a destination and speak to no one and not even have to know the native tongue. There are apps that convert things, such as names, restaurants, everything else within their native languages, experiences. And there's also apps that convert languages as well. And so when you're thinking about why is that important, travelers, especially the younger demographic, truly are relying on these apps and the internet in order to be a critical tool for their travel within a new destination. So we have the infrastructure that has been able to support it, candidly behind some countries, but it's something that truly is becoming a focal point within the traveler coming to the US and asking, do you have an app? Can I use this? Where's the internet? Where can I buy a SIM card? All of those sort of things. Now, the next component of that, and why it's relevant, is we're seeing the hoteliers, the suppliers, really continue to rely on technology in order to feed and efficiently distribute their product to partners such as Bonnetel, other distribution channels, the OTAs, the other wholesalers, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you look at that, that's in some of the examples, maybe Derbysoft, HBSI, those sort of things, where they're using the technology to more efficiently mark up their prices, yield off their prices, and provide a more seamless way of booking travel. So travel presumably is getting easier to book, which is a good trend for all of us. The other thing, from an IT standpoint, and where we look at it in our business, is on the distribution side. So we're seeing the need to invest in technology at an insane pace. You're talking, some of the OTAs have CapEx budgets over $1 billion. It becomes incredibly challenging, depending on where you sit within the ecosystem, to ever try and compete with that. And so now, more than ever, you have to really find out who you are, what are your core values as a company and organization, and continue to work and evolve your value proposition. And that leads me to my next point, and it's all about experiences. Experiences, 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 experiences. And what we found is that people don't want to just go on a cookie cutter tour. They want to go on something that's unique. Obviously, there's the cell phone component of it. Like, I've got to be able to take a picture. I've got to be able to share it with Susie. I got to make sure Susie understands that I was just at this location. I got to make sure Susie likes it. If she doesn't, we're not going to be friends anymore. And from that standpoint, people really want and are truly focused around the experiences. So what does that do? That really tells us, in my opinion, that while a hotel is great, it's a hotel. And while it's always going to be relevant, and there's going to be the traveler that wants a 5-star experience, they're more and more focused on what's going on around them and the experience within it. So what we're seeing are the hoteliers trying to figure out how do they improve their experience and cater to this new demographic of traveler, while intertwining themselves within the culture of a city or a destination. And that's something that's a paradigm shift, because it used to be, I'm the hotel, come to me, and now people are saying, I don't really care so much. I want to go 50 minutes outside of the main town to go to this winery that their wine somehow showed up in my city in London, or wherever they may or may not live. And so experiences continue to be a key focal point as to what the travelers are looking for. So why is that relevant to everyone in the room? We really have to understand how to best sell our destination, which is the United States, and stop focusing on the major, the Statue of Liberty or the major attractions. While very, very important and always will be, we've got to dig a little deeper, come a little bit more creative, and truly be able to exemplify and market our beautiful country and the landscape that it is and all that we have to offer. I can tell you myself, having done a couple speaking engagements and having to move with different meetings or companies that we're looking to acquire, I've seen more of the US in the last 18 months, and it's been eye-opening to me because I didn't know certain cities existed, and I didn't know they were as cool as they were. I just happened to go there, and it's not that I got an F in geography when I was young. I was a 4.3 student, by the way, just an FYI. Which included an A in geography. But it opens your eyes into the opportunity that exists within our backyard and how critical it is to market and sell those destinations, not just through the likes of our channel, but through Brand USA, the other tour operators, travel agents, all of those sort of things. The next sort of trend that we're seeing is the resurgence of the travel agent. And so when you look at the paradox of choice, you can go on some booking channels and you have 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 hotels that are online. You look at it and you go, oh shit, like what am I going to do? Where do we go? How do we go there? What do we want to do? Well, the thing is that the most valuable thing in this world is one thing and one thing only: time. And people do not want to spend the time as much as they used to doing the due diligence to look on 30, 40 travel sites to figure out how to get to Miami, which hotel to stay in, and I'm using a very generic example, which hotel to stay in, because when you go with a couple of your buddies or your girlfriend, that's a different trip than when you're going with your family and you have children, and that's a different trip when you have a romantic getaway with your husband or partner. And so now more than ever, people are reverting back to the travel agent, one, because they want accountability. So when you book online, it's buyer beware, whatever you have, you have. We all know the photos are often bullshit. It is what it is. And oftentimes it's hard to differentiate between what's a good product and what's not, and what's an accurate photo or not. And so we're seeing a resurgence back to the travel agent, which is great, not just for Americans, because I've heard it since I've been in this industry that travel agents, tour operators are dead, yet every year everyone posts year-on-year growth. Now, that necessitates a different skill set, which is not for this conversation, but we are focusing a lot more on the travel agent, ensuring they have marketing tools, assets, and everything that they need to become educated as a travel agent. And so we continue to see that trend happen. We see it to continue to grow because it's the paradox of choice. So people don't want or can't figure out how to navigate all this information. And so they're calling an expert to help and walk them through it. And when you look at time and the significance of that time, and especially when we look at from the millennials down and even all the way up into our lives, I mean, if you can remember, there was a time where we had 1G internet on our phone. Then it went to 2G. Now most of us should, I don't know what phone plans you're on, should see an LTE on the right-hand side of your phone. Well, every time that goes to 4G or 3G, or God forbid you're on an international plan and it's whatever G they think you're giving you that it doesn't work, we all want to throw our phones. Well, that used to be lightning fast for us, and that's no longer the case. The reason is that people no longer have the patience because it's all about time. And that's why you see the sharing economy, the Ubers, the Lyfts, and all of that sort of stuff come into play, and the significance of it, it's time. And so people are reverting back to a travel agent in order to have them, help them plan their itineraries, their holidays, and not have to do anything. I just want to show up and have it taken care of. And if I'm recently married, but I've heard stories when you have a mother-in-law traveling with you and the hotel isn't up to snuff and the wife told you to stay around the corner and you didn't do it, sometimes it's better to have somebody else to blame. So travel agents are continuing to be a significant thing. The last topic that I'll talk about is the convergence of hospitality. So what does that mean? There's now Airbnb, short-term rentals, 5-star hotels, luxury hotels, mid-scale, upper mid-scale. You have economy. You have every different type of accommodation. You even have glamping. You have tents now. We've seen those. The point is that the consumer is no longer defined by one source of accommodation type. And there's a convergence within hospitality in which you can't be identified with just one because they're all relevant. So sometimes if I'm going on a trip by myself or with my husband, I may be more of a 5-star accommodations guy. Sometimes if I'm staying in an area, like I was just in Cannes for ILTM back in December, and it was significantly cheaper and actually a better accommodation to rent a condo there. I mean, I had this place right across the street. You had a porch or a balcony sitting right out there. You could have your rosé. I mean, everything was beautiful, and it was literally 25% the cost. So that may be the type of traveler I am at that time. There's also the traveler when you're going in groups, and you used to be dependent upon getting a group rate at the hotel, in which you're like, you know what, it's a much better experience to have 4, 5, 6 couples, or 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 friends, rent a house, maybe get a chef, or just have the house, have your own pool, go to the garage, go to the grocery store, get your own groceries, alcohol, everything else. And that's a shift in the way people are booking. And then sometimes you're just traveling on business. It's all about convenience. So you don't care if it's a mid-scale or economy hotel. You just need to be where you need to be, and you're never in the hotel. The point is there's a convergence around hospitality in which all of these sort of things are becoming relevant, and everyone can't ignore it. So there's the phenomenon that everybody's concerned about that they talk about is Airbnb, 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 Airbnb. It's not just Airbnb. It's a shift within the mentality of the consumer today within our industry that we all have to be aware of, because we have to know when and how to market and reach that consumer at the time in which they're thinking they want a home versus a luxury hotel versus a tent versus a mid-scale hotel or an economy hotel. And that's where it becomes incredibly challenging as destinations, organizations, and those sort of things is how do you penetrate through the noise? Because if I'm hell-bent of booking within a group and we're gonna book a villa or a house in Napa or wine country, and you're starting to flank me with a mid-scale hotel, guess what? You just wasted a lot of ad money trying to reach that customer, and it ends up becoming just noise. And so what we're seeing is the shift around all of these sort of asset types. And so for Bonnetel, the same rings true for the international traveler. Dependent on the type of trip they're coming for, dependent on why they're coming, dependent on where they're going, they want different asset types to stay in, different accommodations. And so we all have to be cognizant about it. So what we've had to do is, Bonnetel started and has always been a luxury tour operator. And while we'll always hang our hat on that, when it's better to me and I like staying in those hotels and those sort of things, the reality is that the bulk of the people are booking different asset classes, and the bulk of the people are staying in different types of accommodations at different times, not only within the year, they're booking multiple types of accommodations during their stay. So maybe they come, they start first 2 days, Beverly Wilshire, then they'll go glamping up the coast, and then they'll come back, they'll do a economy accommodation in the national park, and then they circle back and end up back in a luxury accommodation before they go on their hotel. I mean, the stuff is happening, irrespective of their wealth or the typical type of hotel that they've always stayed in. And so that's another major trend that we're seeing, and a trend that we're having to differentiate our supply in order to appeal to the international traveler. So just because they're coming from abroad doesn't mean that they're not traveling that way. So that's really kind of a high level of everything I was trying to run through with you guys. I'll open it up for questions, comments. Malcolm?
When you talk about buyer beware, something came to my mind. It's a buyer festival on Netflix. So if you haven't seen it, download it and watch it going home.
Billy!
But a question for you. You had mentioned something when you were talking
Yes.
So inbound operators are fierce competitors, but yet oftentimes you're also each other's customers. How the hell does that work?
A lot of alcohol. No, it's just the nature of the beast. So gone are the days where nobody works together and you have to have a contentious relationship with your competitors. I think that, Seville, you just because he referenced you, I'll pick on you a little bit. You look at it to where healthy competition is good, doing business ethically is good, and it actually makes competition a little bit more fun. Maybe not from a financial standpoint, because you'd like to be able to charge whatever you want and take all the lion's share. But the reality is that multiple operators and tour operators are working more closely than ever. And the reason is that, when Seville and I were just talking about this, sometimes for me, I know where my supply is better than anybody else. There are other destinations in which hotel beds supply is better than ours. So at some point, absent my ego, it makes more economic sense to purchase from hotel beds. And the same rings through, you could see it, the OTAs are starting to buy from wholesalers and bed banks. You look at people are buying back the other way. People are leveraging technology. People are licensing technology across one another. I mean, people are really becoming in bed and intertwined like never before. And it's something in which people need to understand the nature of the beast, because I don't see it stopping. And it's getting more complicated and complex than it was 7-8 years ago, in which we were the odd couple in the room when people said, "You work with hotel beds?" And it's like, yeah. They're like, "How does that work?" And it's, but it is something that's more frequent and prevalent in today's world.
Any other questions?
Yes, I do. How do you see Bonnet in 2 years from now?
A lot bigger. There's, when you look at Bonnet specifically, like I mentioned before, we're heavily dependent upon the US. We've expanded out into North America. There's no secret we have a very strong relationship with Travel Leaders Group. Necessitates a different type of demand in which we need to expand our product and supply, and so we definitively will expand our supply into other destinations. Still curated and focused on what fits within kind of Bonnet's curation process in order to ensure that we maintain reputational risk with the type of product we're selling. Not that any other product type is better than the other. I won't discriminate on that. It's just, for us, that's where I see growth. We're also actively looking for acquisitions, a little bit different than some of the others, maybe, because I think the ship has sailed on becoming the biggest, largest bed bank in the world, and so we're charting a different path. For us, we have no interest in becoming an OTA. I think that's pretty much well established from our side. You can call me later. That's really kind of where I see Bonnet. I anticipate, and what we're projecting to be at least 3 times the size we are today.
Can you also elaborate on your top 5 markets? I know UK, you mentioned that.
Yeah. I mean, our top source market or destination? Yeah, for us, it's the UK. You look at Germany. Now I would say Asia overall has eclipsed Australia, even though Australia is one of our largest markets. And then you kind of go back to rest of Europe. And that brings me to a great point as to markets that are suffering. I alluded to the largest volatility that exists today, and the biggest risk, in my opinion, being the UK. We've definitively seen a fall off in China, given trade sanctions, those sort of things. The rest of Asia is less impacted. Japan, dependent on the currency, yes, but that market in itself is holding strong. We're still seeing significant growth out of India and other emerging markets within there. I'd say the Middle East, what we're projecting this year is still double-digit growth. So I think that we're starting to see a little bit of the market revert back to numbers that were maybe 2 years ago before some of the stuff that happened in Saudi Arabia or some of the sanctions that the U.S. were or were not putting in place. I think the traveler is again becoming more comfortable coming to the U.S. Overall. Germany for us is exploding. I look at rest of Europe is exploding. When you look at political situation and currency, Brazil's really starting to normalize, which is like a breath of fresh air because it's been kind of a very depressed market for many, many years. And you can't forget about, as long as the economy is holding within the U.S., I mean, one of the largest markets is still U.S. travelers traveling within the United States.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
What are some of the other U.S. markets that are surprising you?
As far as from the
Secondary markets that are getting popular.
I mean, Seattle is, you can't find a room. Nashville is great as a destination and awareness. I do think that you're seeing some of the supply stuff come into play with an abundance of supply coming onto the market, maybe a little too much. Still a hot destination. Portland, another one. Texas is exploding. You look at Dallas, Austin, those destinations. And one market that's been adversely impacted for multiple reasons. Some of it is a supply constraint throughout last year and even moving into this year. And the halo effect of the government shutdown in DC is Boston. So we definitely are seeing a challenging market out of Boston for sure. But those are some of the immediate ones that pop into my head. Probably no surprise to anybody in this room. Thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Commentary.
What? Yeah.
So I always appreciate that candid and colorful
I
commentary.
gave myself only 2 swear words, and I went to 3.
Well, we're going to turn it over to Ruth F. Bonnet next, to go over sponsorships. No pressure there, Ruth.
Bring out your effing checkbooks. Just,
That's all I need to say.
yes, get to the point.
All right, thanks again.
Thank you guys. Thanks, sir. Thank you. That was helpful.